As I called him Governor Trudeau, I said, listen, what would happen if we didn't subsidize you? Why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada? Look, I called him Governor Trudeau because they should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state.
The battle began. Canada and the United States, two nations bound by history, geography, and trade. But in recent years, the relationship has turned cold, affecting hundreds and thousands of people. Now, it's not just a diplomatic battle. It's a battle for identity, sovereignty, and economic dominance. Welcome to Canada versus Trump. Who will win? Let's find out. To explain this issue at hand, let's turn the clock back to the disturbing times of Donald Trump's presidency. Although Donald Trump's campaign message was loud and clear, "Make America Great Again," and rang very loud in the ears of millions of Americans, it set the alarm or alert in Canada on edge.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
People of Canada had different emotions after Trump was announced as the next president.
I went to bed at like 2. I woke up at 6. I went to hug my daughter and just say I'm sorry.
I had a weird feeling in my stomach. I was feeling scared for women's rights.
So Donald Trump will be taking over the White House in January, and this will have implications on Canadians.
First, after Donald Trump took control, Canada feared the tariffs that were supposed to be imposed on Canada by Trump. It's not just tariffs. These were calls for Canada's falling economy to fall further, which deeply enrages Canadians and politicians at the same time. He released a statement about imposing tariffs on Canada, which says,
social media, the tariffs would remain in place until the two countries clamp down on drugs, particularly fentanyl, and migrants crossing the border illegally.
Canada, often seen as America's serene, quieter, polite neighbor, was suddenly thrown into the spotlight. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the tariffs insulting, a term rarely heard in diplomatic circles. And from that moment, a political drama began to unfold, which can have deeper impacts on both countries. The backlash was severe. Different statements started to come forward. Reactions were recorded and bans were imposed on the U.S.
President-elect Donald Trump is doubling down on his threat to impose a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico. But officials in Canada are fighting back, threatening to cut off some U.S. imports.
The reactions from the politicians were severe.
We will go to the full extent, depending how far this goes. We will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State, and over to Wisconsin.
Poilievre talked about tariff threats in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, whether one thinks that President Trump's tariff threats are a negotiating tactic or a real plan, what we do know is what we can control. And the Prime Minister has lost control of everything. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending and the deficit, lost control of inflation and housing costs, lost control of his own caucus. This has put Canada in an unbearably weak position. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister reverse all the damage he's done, or will he just call a carbon tax election so we can do it for him?
I think the Leader of the Opposition needs to reflect carefully on whether he really wants to amplify the erroneous narratives that the Americans are putting forward around, for example, our border, when less than 1% of migrants coming into the United States irregularly come from Canada, where 0.2% of fentanyl coming into the United States comes from Canada. These are things that we would all do well to stand up and say, yes, there's things we can and are working on together at our border, but amplifying these broken narratives is simply not responsible leadership.
The tariffs were not the only issue between Trump and Canada. Fast forward to 2024. Trump, now a strong political leader, shaping the Republican narrative, made headlines again. During a rally in Iowa, he shocked the world with a statement that was as bleak as it was controversial.
I said to Trudeau, I said, why are we subsidizing you $200 and $250 billion a year? He said, I really don't know. And I said, well, I don't know either. I said, what would happen to Canada if we didn't? He said Canada would be obliterated if that happened. I said, then Canada should be a 51st state. And that's where we are now.
The crowd cheered on Trump's statement, but Canada was upset as it is downright dangerous for them. Social media lit up with the likes of Not Your 51st and Canada Strong. People started to come forward. Politicians, Canadian citizens, and news reporters, as this is not just a statement, it's a danger posed on their identity, sovereignty, and most importantly, a huge global interference in the country's matter. Trudeau responded in an interview.
But that's not going to happen. Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American. There is such a depth of pride that that's not actually an issue. What I think is happening in this is President Trump, who's a very skillful negotiator, is getting people to be somewhat distracted by that conversation, to take away from the conversation around 25% tariffs.
At first, people were calling out Trudeau for making an alliance with Trump. But after Trump's resignation, Trump took all the credit to himself. This was not the first time Trump gave such statements. He was always talking about subsidizing Canada.
We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. The United States is subsidizing Canada. As I called him Governor Trudeau, I said, listen, what would happen if we didn't subsidize you? Because we give them a lot of money.
But beneath the surface of politics is a deeper war: the economy. Trump has accused Canada of ripping off the United States for decades in trade. And while NAFTA's successor, the USMCA, was supposed to remove the tensions, Trump's threat to impose tariffs reignited the flames. Canada's answer? Strengthening its trade partnerships with Europe and Asia. But could it get by without U.S. trade? That's the trillion-dollar question. Beyond the economic debate is a cultural divide. Trump's noisy and bold, America-first attitude plays strongly against Canada's values of multiculturalism and inclusiveness. Trudeau's damaging policies on climate, immigration, and healthcare are light years from what Trump has to say about America. When Trump suggested subsidizing Canada, he wasn't just talking about money. He was questioning Canada's ability to stand on its own. And for Canadians, that's more than an insult. It's a challenge. Trump's words sparked more than just anger. They brought real-world results. Canada's government met in an emergency session. Trudeau gave a rare primetime address. As the debate grew and escalated, public opinion in both countries was divided. Some Americans support Trump's idea, seeing it as a way to strengthen North America. Others are horrified by what they call an imperialist approach. In Canada, the majority is clearly against the statement and Trump interference, but some are challenging whether increased cooperation with the U.S. would prove an economic explosion. Internationally, the comments by Trump have sparked great debate. The UK and France have spoken in support of Canadian sovereignty, while China and Russia believe this will help strengthen their relationships with Ottawa. The question is no longer just about Canada and the U.S. It's about the balance of power in a rapidly changing world. So, who will win this high-stakes battle? Canada, a nation fighting to protect its sovereignty and identity? Or Trump, a man determined to reshape the geopolitical landscape to fit his vision? In fact, there might not be a clear winner. What is certain is that this battle will forever change both countries. It's a tale of power, pride, and the unyielding fight for independence. Canada versus Trump, a battle for the ages. But in the end, the question isn't who will win. It's whether the two can find common ground before it's too late.